Today, we are going to look at color again. So we've been hand rendering in color, and we're going to just sort of transition that just for this half a class period into what that looks like on a computer screen. Because so many of you are in graphic design or in art, and even in architecture, we're going to be producing things with Illustrator, Photoshop. Right? So we have to have an understanding of not only what we can achieve by hand with mixing colors, but kind of what they also mean in a visual. So we're going to do a short lecture, then we're going to watch a video on a professor who's speaking at Yale on Joseph Albers, who historically was really well known as a painter. He would assign, also in academia, he would assign his students color problems. And what we'll look at is he would say, make two colors look like one. How do you do that? So I'll do an intro, we'll watch a video for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to hand render another drawing to close out the class. So certainly all of us have heard of Roy G. Biv. So we'll take a look at, we describe things as value and hue and saturation. We'll just kind of think about these terms specifically. Hue is, what color are you actually using? So what hue of orange or yellow did you use to achieve the top of the wall house? Right? Value being how light or dark that color is. All right, so value, light or dark. We could talk about that as saturation, right? Or the strength of the color as well. When we look at the word saturation, how that compares to why we might be adding white, gray, or black to that color, or how gray or dull is that color. We've been using a lot of value scales, mainly in graphite, using the 2H compared to the 2U. Chroma, how bright is the color? We can look at how we mix colors digitally. Again, shade and tone, we can say that that's also back to saturation, shade, tone, and tint. We are using black, gray, or white. So we'll repeat these words again and again. We have a context to compare them to. All right, so if color saturation is the intensity of color in an image, let's talk about the color wheel here for a second. So we have primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. Yes, so that's what we see in the middle of this triangle. And then we mix those two adjoining colors and we get a secondary color. You've all heard this, right? All right, so we're going to look at selecting a value based on what you're typically going to find in Illustrator or Photoshop when you choose the color, right? So if we want, let's say, red, and we select the paint tool, we usually get a menu that looks like this online. So we can make that red value brighter by switching or pulling that toggle down to the white color. So if you want a brighter color, it means it's whiter. If you want it duller, what might you do to that bar? It goes from white to black. You want it dull red, where would you move the bar? Darker, yeah, grayer, right? So we're changing kind of the saturation of the value of that color, like adding additional gray or black. One printer cartridge, and it has yellow, black, cyan, magenta. That's all going to be what we call CMYK color. Right? So if we're printing something, we're using the bottom image in the screen. And what it means is that as we continue to add color, so your printer is saying how much yellow, how much magenta, right, to achieve the color that you want printed. It's just going to continue to add colors. And if we add all the colors, we get black. Okay, so that's in printing. CMYK, now we start to notice your printer cartridges has that. If you want to ensure that what you see digitally on your screen prints out CMYK, there are a couple tools online. You can use Pantone colors. Each color, every hue, every value has a number associated with it. And in that number, it tells you how much cyan, yellow, left, whatever you're using. So you can dictate the color that you print out just based on a number. But let's say your world is going to exist only digitally, right? You're going to use the color system of RGB. And this is different when we start adding color. It's really colors of light. If we add all the colors of light, it actually becomes white. A little different than how we're prints. I think what I want you to remember today is that there's some of these two color systems, one for printing, one for digital work. Each of them have numbers that we can find in a Pantone example. Okay, just to reiterate, yeah, both RGB and CMYK are modes for mixing color and graphic design. RGB color mode is best for the digital work, CMYK for printing products. We'll go down to the bottom. Pantone provides a standardized system for color identification and matching, right? So if you were to go on your phone and choose an app called Color Picker, you can choose any color in the spectrum, and it's going to give you an output across the bottom here. I'll zoom in, right, of what its RGB numbers are, CMYK, and then 2 additional sources. I'll give you a second just to screenshot. You can also, in the next 20 minutes, copy the link here across the top and watch it on your own. We're going to draw the image in the upper right. Again, we're recreating this by hand, but with the sunset and the shades of gray, concrete sides. I thought it would be a nice experiment for you to play with. How do you work with adjacency, adjacent color to accentuate the vanishing point that we use to draw that bright image? All right, the Louis Kahn. So Salk Institute, Jonas Salk, 1960s, yes, 59. He came up with the polio vaccine. And in San Diego, California, wanted to build a research center and invited Louis Kahn to come over and design that for him. What we're going to see in the research center is another kind of theory of Louis Kahn in the way in which he creates architecture, meaning that there are spaces that we exist in, and there are spaces that help this space function, right, like circulation in the hallway. There are also spaces above our ceiling where we have ducts, HVAC ductwork, right? That's serving our space. This theory of how does he have perfect labs and then all of the functions that make that lab divided in his plan. We were doing programming for the museum. We weren't so much thinking about the sprinkler system or the way HVAC ran space, electricity, right? We were really just thinking about the way in which we would use the building. But as architects, we think about how those spaces function well for us. You know, the thermal temperature. So Louis Kahn decided that he was going to incorporate labs and offices and create an axis on the center of the site, kind of led out toward a view of the ocean, and he would mirror right over that axis to buildings that were very similar. So on each side of this plaza, we have offices, spaces that kind of look out onto that plaza, and laboratories. So again, when we start to work with drawing that image we looked in the last shot, you're going to focus on locating a vanishing point in order to help you establish that drawing. We're looking at the right image here of some of the offices. And then you can start to see the 2 types of material Louis Kahn used to create the research center, concrete and wood. All right, so I'll read some of this. The drawing on the left, I know we don't know the building so well. This is a vertical cut, though. What type of drawing is that called? If I have plant sections and elevations, what would be the vertical cut section? Okay, so if we imagine cutting the biological center, we'll flip back a couple slides to look at it again in an aerial view, right? Let's imagine I'm vertically cutting this building, slicing down, and I start to see many large open rooms, and then a lot of structure kind of on these floors between, through which, if we're in the laboratory, a lot of chemicals, maybe we need natural gas, you can imagine that you have quite a bit of tubes or utilities that are going to serve the labs below. Almost giving some hierarchy to the lab, but almost equal hierarchy to everything that's served. So at Salk, Kahn takes a separation and definition to a degree of explicit hierarchy, and that he actually creates new floors in which all the pipes and exhaust ducts exist, which we can see in section. Creates a layered effect. The laboratory spaces are uncluttered with the heavy mechanics that would otherwise be exposed, and in Kahn's opinion, would distract scientists. So he's trying to make it more clean and visually clutter-free environment so scientists can focus on the work at hand. Offices, studies, photo labs, and library are separated from the primary lab space by that service space. And a ring of those served spaces of the labs of the places where we exist surround that. Again, we see another section, but now we have some of the utilities in between those levels of labs. All right, so what's the drawing type on the bottom called? Yet another construction section. We see a little bit more detail and see the different materials. Okay, so we're going to go back to our beginning image. So we're going to spend the rest of class drawing this. I'm going to encourage you to draw it in pen so that when you add color to it, all right, I think that makes it large enough for those in the back. So that when we add color to it, we're not blending in the graphite. Because we have a vanishing point. However, not all of the concrete office forms reflect that vanishing. So the ground line is going to be the bottom edge of my frame. This is my book. I'll give you a couple tools to get started, and then I'll let you work on come around. I'm going to put the ground line at the bottom of my page with a really light, because I'm working in pen. I'm going to locate the horizon where you see the vanishing point. So I am locating my vanishing point just above the end of the plaza. So I kind of see everything going toward a point here. Right, or if we're online, a point here. And if we use our measuring techniques, does that point look as if it's in the center of our frame or maybe just slightly below? You do not need to write vanishing point, but maybe you have just a small dot that helps. I'm going to locate the far edge of the plaza. Again, I'm looking at measuring techniques to understand how wide it is and where it is in relationship to my vanishing point or ground line. So on the board, I'm going to draw this really thick, but I've established the ground line here across the whole page. I've located a vanishing point here. And then I've just drawn the back side of the plaza. There are concrete control joints on the opposite side. If I'm looking at the center, on the far right and left side of the benches. And again, I'm just structuring my drawings so that I can add detail in a minute. But I'm going to use this vanishing point of a control joint behind those benches as a guide. I'm going to then focus. I know I'm going through this rather fast. I'm going to focus on two linear angled lines just to establish how those offices, that concrete construction on either side of the piazza, go from the very small form we see at the end of the plaza to the larger form. And again, this is maybe as light as the horizon line. I'm going to give myself a guide that moves through that linear angle line as a guide. And I'm going to let you work from there. Sometimes someone might like to start with the far rectilinear form or the angle, which is different than the vanishing point of the rectilinear form that is closer to us here. All right, so I'm going to let you begin for about 10-15 minutes, and then I'm going to come around and take a look or help.